It is possible to lie on a beach in the sunshine with a good book and a cool drink and a dreadfully troubled mind, a soul in turmoil. What does it mean to rest? And what do you know of it in your own life?
Welcome to Open the Bible with Pastor Colin Smith. I'm David Pick. And Colin, that's a great question. What does it mean to rest?
Yeah, I'm thinking about someone just the other day who said to me, I need to learn how to rest. He said, I watch television for 4 hours and I feel exhausted at the end of it. What is all that about? And I think we all know what it is to actually be in a restful environment. Even when you have some days off, if you don't have rest in your own soul, in your own mind, in your own heart, then all you're doing is kind of worrying on a beach or whatever. And so what is rest? And the Bible speaks to this. There is no rest for the wicked. But Jesus says, come to me and I will give you rest. And right at the beginning of the Bible, we're going to be looking in the book of Genesis as to how God himself rested from his labors, having completed his work. So the Bible has so much to say about this. I need to keep learning about it in my own life. And what better place to come than to the scriptures?
So it sounds as if when Jesus talks about rest, he's talking about a different kind of rest than we would think.
Yeah, I think he's talking about rest for your soul. And there isn't really rest for the body apart from rest for the soul. God's made us a body-soul unity. I need to sleep, but I'm only going to be able to sleep really well if there's peace in my mind and in my heart. And that comes out of the whole dynamic of our relationship with God and rolling our anxieties onto him. It's a really important subject.
So if you can, join us in Genesis and chapter 2 as we begin the message, The Climax of Living. Here's Colin.
I wonder if you've ever asked the question, what does it mean to rest? Is this flopping down in front of a television with a remote control to exercise your thumb? If so, why is it that it is possible to sit in front of a television for an hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours, and at the end to feel more frustrated than you feel rested? Ever experienced that? Is it going to sleep? Is it taking a vacation or lying on a beach with a good book in the sunshine and a cool drink? Yes, but it is possible to lie on a beach in the sunshine with a good book and a cool drink and a dreadfully troubled mind, a soul in turmoil. What does it mean to rest? And what do you know of it in your own life? Well, I reached for the trusted, concise Oxford Dictionary and found these two definitions. Here's the first. Rest. To repose or sleep, the Oxford Dictionary says, especially in bed at night. Isn't that very profound? Now, I want to suggest to you that that is not what the Bible means by the word rest. It cannot mean going to sleep, especially in bed at night, for the simple reason that the Bible tells us God rested. And God does not need to sleep. In fact, the Psalms tells us very specifically that God never slumbers nor sleeps. The reason that God rested on the seventh day after creation was not that he was exhausted and didn't have energy for anything else until he had time to catch up. God is never exhausted. God is never tired. He is never worn out, but he does rest. And he tells us specifically that he wants us to enter into his rest. So whatever that rest is, it's not lying in bed at sleep at night. So I plowed on and found this definition in the dictionary. To be relieved from exertion or action or movement or employment. And again, I want to suggest to you that that cannot be what the Bible means when it talks about rest for this simple reason. That if you look in Isaiah chapter 57, which will be our focus next week, the Bible makes it very clear that there is no rest for the wicked. That the wicked are like the troubled sea that cannot rest. In other words, the rest that God talks about and that he wants you to know is something that by definition the wicked cannot experience. Now, it is perfectly obvious to us all, surely, that wicked people do go on vacation. It is perfectly possible for a wicked person to read a good book on a warm, sunny day on the beach with a cool drink, is it not? So whatever this rest is that God is talking about, it is something more and something other than this definition of ceasing from activity or from employment. So I want to offer a working definition that we'll use over these next 3 weeks that you can explore as we go through the scriptures together. And it's simply this, that at its root, the biblical concept of rest is all about a purpose fulfilled or a project completed. A purpose fulfilled or a project completed. We find the root of that in Genesis in chapter 3 when God had finished his work of creation. He saw that everything was good, and because that project was completed, because that purpose was fulfilled, he entered into rest. All that God had purposed to do with regard to the creation of the world was accomplished, and so he entered into rest. You find that also as we think about this experience of the wicked never resting. Why is it that the wicked never rest? Because the wicked have decided to pick a fight with God. And if you decide to pick a fight with God, to resist the claims of God on your life, then your purpose will never be fulfilled. Your project will never be accomplished. The wicked are engaged in a struggle they can never by definition win, because to be wicked is to oppose yourself to God. That is why, by definition, all of their lives and for all eternity, the wicked are restless. The wicked cannot escape from God. The problem is there is simply no place for them to go. David says in the Psalms, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where could I flee from your presence? If I go up into the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there." Now, if you love God, that is something wonderful. There's no place in the world where I will be outside of the reach of his loving care. But if you are the wicked and you have set yourself against God, that is absolutely terrifying. There's no place in the world or in eternity you can ever get away from him. Even death, if you choose it, would only be a corridor that brings you immediately into his visible presence. So the wicked can never rest. Their purpose in life of resisting God can never be fulfilled. Their objective of avoiding him can never be completed. Then if we think on into the New Testament, when Jesus speaks about rest, remember he said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden." We're going to think about this in 2 weeks' time. And Jesus said, "I will give you rest." What did he mean? He's telling you this: your life has a God-given purpose. And if Jesus says, "You come to me," I will lead you into that purpose for which God has created you. Follow me and take my yoke upon you, become my disciple, and everything that God has purposed to do in you and through you will be fulfilled. Come to me, and I will give you rest. Or if we look back in Psalm 37 and verse 7, I'm quoting from the Authorized Version particularly here, though the meaning in other translations is the same. We find one of the great secrets of the Christian life, Psalm 37, which we quoted in prayer earlier. The wicked, we see this in our newspapers, are frenetic in their activity. And sometimes they seem to be very successful. The Bible says to us, don't fret because of the wicked. Don't worry about them. Instead, trust in the Lord and do good. And then David says, Psalm 37 and verse 7, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him." So beautifully put to music by Mendelssohn. Oh, rest in the Lord. Wait patiently for him. What does that mean? To rest in the Lord? To rest in the Lord means to live in the anticipation of the completion of all things. to know deeply within your soul that whatever is going on in this troubled world, God will fulfill every one of his purposes. Every one of his projects will be complete. When Jesus Christ returns in glory, there will be no loose ends. There will be no unfinished business. Not in your life, not in the life of his people, not in the whole creation. When we see him, we will be like him. And so in the middle of all your struggles and all your disappointments, hold on to this. Every one of God's purposes will be fulfilled. All of God's projects will be completed as you struggle with anxieties and fears over money and career and children and grandchildren and health. Rest in the Lord.
You're listening to Pastor Colin Smith on Open the Bible and a message called The Climax of Living. All this month we've been looking at a book called The Enemy Within, Straight Talk for the Power and Defeat of Sin. And this is the last week we're able to offer this book as a free gift if you're able to set up a new donation to the work of Open the Bible of at least £5 per month or more. Full details on our website, openthebible.org.uk. Back to the message now. Here's Colin.
Now, the question before us then is, how are you going to enjoy God's gift of rest? And we're going to begin today by exploring God's model of rest right at the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis in chapter 2, when on the seventh day after his work of creation, God rested and thereby introduced the principle of Sabbath, which is one of the very important and much neglected themes that runs right the way through the whole of the Bible. So I hope you'll open your Bible with me. Genesis chapter 2 and verses 2 and 3. Let's just focus in on what the Word of God says. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day and he made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. So notice that God makes for his people a special day. And on this special day, he does three things. Number one, God rested on this day. Number two, God blessed this day. And number three, God made this day holy. Now, of course, this theme is taken up in the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day, we read in the 10 Commandments, by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall do your labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. Now, before we get into this further, I think it's important and helpful to acknowledge that Christians have disagreed for centuries over the way in which we should understand this Sabbath principle and the fourth commandment, and all kinds of debates about how we relate it to Sunday in our culture. Let me just, by way of perspective, very briefly say that there are three ways in which you can go on this issue. Three paths, and I'm going to indicate which one we're choosing as we press forward. The first I'd have to describe as the dead end of legalism. I have to say, I think I know about this because the culture I was raised in was full of it. If you were a good Christian in Scotland in the years that I was growing up, you certainly never had a Sunday paper, which always struck me as illogical because people were working to produce it on Saturday night, but that's another point. You wouldn't have gone to a restaurant on a Sunday. There were a whole list of what you would do and what you wouldn't do. And the culture enforced it with a kind of rigidity that is still found in many, many places. That's one way you can go. It's not where I'm heading. And not, I think, where the scriptures would lead us. Many Christians have taken everything that is said in the Old Testament about the Sabbath and just made a straight transfer of all of that onto Sunday. Others have gone even further and said, well, you can't even do that. Christians have no right to change the day, and Christians are under the same Old Testament obligations to observe a day on the week, but it must be the seventh day, and you folks have no right changing it to the first day. The problem with all this kind of approach that comes, it seems to me, from a fundamentally legalist mindset is that it looks remarkably like the mindset of the Pharisees, who went to such lengths to codify exactly what could and could not be done on the Sabbath, and Jesus gave absolutely no support whatsoever to their position. And in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul warns us very severely, and we have to be careful about this, recognizing that there will be different views even within this community on these issues. We have to be very careful about judging one another on the decisions that are made with regards to these issues, in which I'm going to argue God has given us liberty. Do not let anyone judge you, he says in Colossians, with regard to a Sabbath day. A second path that many people have taken, and perhaps in reaction to those who have become more legalistic in their approach, I'm going to call the quagmire of antinomianism. And I apologize for long words, but antinomianism, nomos means law. So antinomos, against the law, antinomianism. It is a word worth knowing because it is the whole mindset of people who don't see a place for law in the Christian life at all. And I'm suggesting to you that just as legalism is a dead end, that antinomianism is a quagmire. Now, there are those within the family of God who are deeply convinced that the Old Testament has nothing to do with us in the New Testament. I hope after our journey through the Bible that we think very differently about that. That the New Testament, they say, gives us liberty to do whatever we want to do with regard to the Sabbath, and therefore we are free to do whatever we like and will do so. The problem with that, and if that is your mindset, I'd like you to think about this. The problem with that is that we quickly lose the value of a gift that God built not even just into the Ten Commandments, but into the very shape of creation itself. And so I want to suggest that avoiding these two routes, the dead end of legalism and the quagmire of antinomianism, that we pursue a third path, which I'd like to describe as the responsible use of Christian liberty. God gives us in Jesus Christ wonderful liberty. That's why we're not to judge one another. The question is, are you going to make responsible use of that liberty that he's given to you? Now, I want to suggest 3 ways in which you might do that. Make responsible use of the liberty that he's given to you with regards to this particular gift of a special day that is so clearly outlined right on the very first page of the Bible. 3 ways in which you might pursue this. Number 1, finish your work. Genesis 2, verse 2. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So, do you see that? So, on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. God had finished his work. His purpose in creation was fulfilled. His project was complete. And that was the foundation of his rest. So here's the first principle of enjoying God's gift of rest. And it's very obvious when you state it, but we miss it in practicality so often. If you are going to enter into God's rest, if you're going to experience it, you have to get your work done. Now, someone will probably say immediately, that's my problem right there. My work is never done. That's why I never enjoy a proper rest. I'm absolutely overwhelmed by my work. My work is never done. Let's try and think biblically about that claim, because it's very often heard among us. We often feel the weight of that. Work is a wonderful gift from God. The Bible begins with God working. Think about that. He gives us the pattern. The mandate to work is as important as the invitation to rest. His work is creative, fulfilling, enterprising, and beautiful, and we are to follow after that pattern. God gives Adam work to do. But when Adam was working in the garden, he was never overwhelmed by his work. Being overwhelmed by your work is something that was only experienced after the fall. Work is good and it is a gift from God. Adam enjoyed it. But being overwhelmed by work is something introduced as an effect of and consequent to the fall. Therefore, being overwhelmed by work is something you and I need saved from, right? If it's something that came in after the fall, I don't need saved from work, but I do need saved from being overwhelmed by it. And God's saving purpose is to restore to you and me everything that Adam lost through the fall, including being in a position of superiority over his work. God said, rule. We find ourselves under. God says, when you come into the new heaven and to the new earth, you will reign. You see, you'll be brought back to that position in which you're restored, not under, but over. That's what his saving work in eternity will ultimately look like, and that saving work is begun in you now. Now, I have to face my wife after this sermon. So I'm going to be honest and say I'm a fellow struggler. We all struggle with all of the effects of the fall, don't we? But when we realize that this is a spiritual issue, that this is actually a dimension of God's plan for your life, that it is actually part of his salvation, that a man or a woman be brought from the position of being overwhelmed by work to a position of being in control of work, that will greatly help you, because at least you will begin to pray about it. At least you will begin to see that it is something that is not arbitrary, but something in which God calls you to grow. To reflect your character, O God, I must gain control of my work as you are in control of your work. I cannot live with my work controlling me. It could change a lot of homes, that, couldn't it?
Well, that might be a rhetorical question, but it's a powerful one nonetheless. You're listening to Open the Bible with Pastor Colin Smith and our message, The Climax of Living. It's part of a series called Give Yourself a Break, How to Enjoy God's Gift of Rest. And many of us live pretty busy lives, so perhaps we need to rediscover that gift of rest which God gives us if we want to take it. If you miss any of the series at any time, or if you want to go back and listen again, don't forget you can do that by coming online to our website, openthebible.org.uk, or looking us up as a podcast on your favourite podcast site. Just search for Open the Bible UK. Also on our website and available as a podcast, you can find Open the Bible Daily. And that's a series of short 2 to 3 minute daily reflections based on Pastor Colin's teaching and read in the UK by Sue McLeish. So that's on our website, openthebible.org.uk. Also on your favourite podcast site, search for Open the Bible UK and subscribe to Open the Bible Daily to receive regular updates. Open the Bible depends on your generosity to keep Pastor Colin's teaching on this station and online. And as you set up a new monthly gift to the work of Open the Bible this month, we want to thank you by sending you a free copy of Chris Lundgaard's book, The Enemy Within, Straight Talk About the Power and Defeat of Sin. Colin, who would you say this book is for?
Well, first is for anyone who is a Christian. By definition, a Christian is a person in whom the Holy Spirit dwells. And also by definition, a Christian is a person who is engaged in a serious battle against sin. The Apostle Paul says we've got to put to death the misdeeds of the body by the power of the Holy Spirit who lives within you. And here's the thing, as you grow in the Christian life, you actually become more aware of the sins that you need to fight against in your life, not less aware of them. So there's an increasing sense of battle that a Christian experiences. And this book by Chris Lundgaard, The Enemy Within, is one of the most helpful books I have ever found on the subject of the battle of the Christian life. It is really encouraging. I've found it helpful, and I think that everyone who reads it will find it helpful too.
Well, we want to send you a copy of this book, Chris Lundgaard, The Enemy Within, Straight Talk About the Power and Defeat of Sin, and it's our thank you gift to you if you're able to set up a new donation to the work of Open the Bible this month in the amount of £5 per month or more. Full details on our website, openthebible.org.uk. For Open the Bible and for Pastor Colin Smith, I'm David Pick, and I hope you'll be able to join us again next time on Open the Bible. Is the burden of what you still have to do stealing the joy of what God has already enabled you to do? Discover the blessings of God's rest next time on Open the Bible.